Get her off my plane, or I'm not turning these engines on. The silence in the cabin was deafening. Captain Silas Gregson stood at the cockpit door, his face twisted in a sneer, pointing a trembling finger at the woman in seat 1A. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't fighting. She was just sitting there, wearing a faded grey hoodie, checking her emails. To Silas, she looked like a mistake, a security breach. To the rest of the world, she was about to become a legend. He thought he held all the power at 30,000 feet. He had no idea that the woman he was trying to kick off wasn't just a passenger. She was the reason he would never fly again. The rain at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey was relentless, hammering against the sleek, polished fuselage of the Bombardier Global 7500. It was a miserable Tuesday morning, the kind that made the tarmac look like a grey ocean. Inside the private terminal of Vanguard Elite Aviation, the atmosphere was warm, smelling of expensive espresso and old money. Nia Cross pulled her hood up as she stepped out of the black SUV. She didn't look like the typical clientele of Teterboro. There were no Louis Vuitton trunks trailing behind her, no entourage of assistants, and certainly no flashing jewelry. She wore a comfortable, slightly oversized charcoal hoodie, black leggings, and a pair of worn-in sneakers. A backpack was slung over one shoulder. To the unobservant eye, she looked like a college student who had gotten lost on her way to a commercial terminal. But Nia wasn't lost. She was tired. She had spent the last 48 hours in a marathon negotiation in Tokyo, closing a deal that would fundamentally shift the logistics of global medical transport. She hadn't slept in nearly 2 days. All she wanted was to get back to Los Angeles, take a hot shower, and sleep for a week. She walked up the steps of the private jet, head down against the wind. At the top of the stairs stood Andrew, the flight attendant. Andrew was young, new to the company, and had a nervous energy about her. She scanned a tablet, her eyes widening slightly as she saw Nia approach. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Cross," Andrew said, her professional smile faltering for a split second as she took in Nia's attire. In the world of private aviation, hoodies were rare unless they were worn by tech billionaires or famous rappers. Nia didn't look like either. "Thanks, Andrew," Nia murmured, her voice raspy with exhaustion. "Is the bed made up in the back? I'm going to need to crash immediately." "Actually, Ms. Cross, we have a slight change," Andrew said apologetically. "The rear stateroom creates a bit of drag balance issue with the luggage load today. Captain's orders. We've set you up in the main cabin seat 1A. It's fully reclining." Nia sighed, too tired to argue. "Fine, as long as I can sleep." She stepped into the cabin. It was opulent cream leather seats, walnut trim gold fixtures. She tossed her backpack onto the seat opposite 1A and collapsed into the plush leather chair. She pulled her hood further down over her eyes, plugged her phone into the charger, and closed her eyes. She didn't notice the cockpit door open. She didn't see the man who stepped out adjusting his tie with a sharp, aggressive tug. Captain Silas Gregson was a man who wore his uniform like a suit of armor. He was 55, with silver hair gelled into submission and a jawline that had hardened over decades of commanding heavy metal through the sky. He was an old-school pilot, the kind who reminisced about the days when pilots were gods and passengers were grateful silent cargo. He had flown for major commercial airlines for 30 years before retiring to the lucrative world of private charters. He missed the prestige of the big airlines, but he loved the money Vanguard paid him. He also loved the control. On this plane, he was the law. Silas walked down the short hallway to the galley to grab a coffee, glancing into the cabin. He stopped dead. His eyes narrowed. He saw the sneakers. He saw the hoodie. He He saw the way the woman was slumped in the seat, looking, in his opinion, utterly trashy. "Andrew!" Silas barked, his voice low, but cutting. Andrew jumped, nearly spilling the water she was pouring. "Yes, Captain." Silas jerked his head toward the cabin. "Who is that?" "That's the passenger, Captain. Ms. Cross." "Cross?" Silas scoffed. "She looks like she hopped the fence and snuck on. Are you sure you checked her ID? She doesn't look like Vanguard material." I checked the manifest, sir. Naya Cross. It's confirmed." Silas stared at Naya. His prejudice was a reflex honed by years of unchecked bias. He saw a young black woman in street clothes and didn't see a paying customer. He saw someone who didn't belong. He saw a problem. "Check it again," Silas snapped. "I'm not hauling some lottery winner or rapper's girlfriend who thinks she owns the place. And tell her to take her feet off the fabrication. This is a $60 million aircraft, not a Greyhound bus." "Sir, her feet are on the floor," Andrew whispered, terrified of his temper. "Just do it," Silas hissed. He turned back to the cockpit, his mood souring. He hated flights like this. He preferred transporting senators' CEOs in suits, people who looked the part. He felt insulted that he, a senior captain with 20,000 flight hours, was being relegated to chauffeur, a girl in a hoodie across the country. It started as irritation. It was about to become an obsession. 10 minutes later, the engines hadn't started. Naya opened one eye. The hum of the auxiliary power unit was running, but the main turbines were silent. She checked her watch. They were 15 minutes past their slot. "Excuse me," Naya called out softly. Andrew hurried over, looking flustered. Her face was pale. "Yes, Ms. Cross. Is there a delay?" "Weather. No, ma'am. The weather is clearing up. It's a technical check. The captain is just verifying some weight and balance numbers." Naya frowned. She knew aviation. She knew weight and balance on a Global 7500 with one passenger and light luggage took about 30 seconds to calculate. "Okay, let me know." Inside the cockpit, the atmosphere was toxic. "I'm telling you, Dave, it doesn't feel right," Silas grumbled to his first officer, Dave Miller. Dave was younger, in his 30s, and just wanted to fly the plane. "Cap, the manifest is clear. Ground ops cleared her. The credit check cleared." "What's the problem?" Dave asked, tapping the flight management computer. "We're burning our slot time. Teterboro ATC is going to push us to the back of the line." "I went back there," Silas muttered, crossing his arms. "She's got this attitude. Didn't even look at me. And I saw her backpack. It looks ragged. Who books a Global 7500 and carries a backpack? Like that, I'm telling you, it's suspicious. It could be a stolen identity credit card scam. It happens. Silas, come on." Dave sighed. "That's above our pay grade. If the company cleared her, we fly her." "Not on my watch," Silas snapped. "I'm the pilot in command. I'm responsible for the safety of this vessel. If I have a bad feeling about a passenger, I have the authority to deny transport. And I have a bad feeling." Silas stood up. He unbuckled his harness. "Where are you going?" Dave asked, alarmed. "I'm going to have a little chat with Ms. Cross, see if her story holds water." Silas stormed out of the cockpit. He adjusted his hat, making sure he looked imposing. He marched into the cabin and stood directly over Naya. Naya was typing on her phone. She sensed the looming presence and looked up. She removed one earbud. "Can I help you?" she asked calmly. Silas stared down at her, expecting her to shrink. Most people did when a captain in full uniform glared at them. "I need to see your identification and your boarding documents. Now." Naya blinked. "I already showed them to the gate agent and the flight attendant." "And now you're showing them to me," Silas said, his voice booming in the small cabin. "I'm the captain. My word is law. ID. Now. Naya's expression hardened. She didn't scramble. She didn't apologize. She simply reached into her bag, pulled out her passport, and held it up. Silas snatched it from her hand. He opened it, scanning the pages aggressively. He was looking for a flaw, a smudge, anything, to justify his bias. Naya Cross, he read aloud, almost mocking the name. No middle name, no. Nia said, "Is there a problem, Captain?" She looked at his name tag. Gregson. The problem, Silas said, closing the passport and tossing it back onto her lap. A disrespect that made Andrew gasp from the galley. Is that I don't believe you're the primary on this contract. Who paid for this flight? Your boyfriend. Your label. The cabin went deadly silent. The air pressure seemed to drop. Naya slowly picked up her passport. She placed it deliberately back into her bag. Then she looked Silas dead in the eye. Her eyes were dark, intelligent, and currently very cold. I paid for it, Nia said quietly. And I'd appreciate it if you went back to the front and did your job. I have a meeting in LA at 4:00 p.m. Silas's face turned red. He wasn't used to being spoken to like staff, even though technically he was. Listen to me, little girl. Silas leaned in, invading her personal space. I don't know who you think you are, or what game you're playing, but I don't fly untrustworthy passengers. You don't fit the profile. And until I'm satisfied that you aren't a security risk or a fraud, this plane doesn't move. I don't fit the profile. Naya repeated, her voice dropping an octave. And what profile is that, Captain? The profile of someone who can afford a $50,000 flight? Silas sneered. Now answer the question. What do you do for a living that affords you this jet? Because looking at you, I'm guessing it's not Wall Street. Nia stared at him for a long beat. I'm a doctor. Silas laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. A doctor, right, and I'm the King of England. Let me guess, you're 25, you haven't even finished med school. I'm 32, Naya said, and I'm a neurosurgeon. Sure you are. Silas waved a hand dismissively. Look, I'm done with this charade. I'm calling ground security. You're going to be escorted off for a full background check. If you're legit, maybe we fly tomorrow. But today, you're off. You're making a mistake, Naya said. She didn't raise her voice, but the authority in her tone was unmistakable. It wasn't the authority of someone who yelled. It was the authority of someone who knew the outcome before the game had even started. The only mistake was letting you board, Silas shot back. He turned to Andrew. Open the door, get the stairs back down. Call ops, and tell them we have a non-compliant passenger who needs removal. Captain, Andrew stammered, tears welling in her eyes. Please, she's done nothing wrong. She's just sitting there. Are you disobeying a direct order? Silas roared, causing Andrew to flinch physically. I said open the door, or you can get off with her and look for a job at McDonald's. Don't speak to her like that, Naya said sharply. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. She wasn't tall, maybe 5'5", but standing, she radiated a dangerous calm. She pulled her phone out. I'm giving you one chance to de-escalate this Captain Gregson, Nia said. Go back to the cockpit. Fly the plane. Apologize to Andrew. If you do that, we can pretend this was just a bad morning. Silas looked at her like she was insane. You're giving me a chance, lady. You are delusional. He grabbed his radio from his belt. Ops, this is Tail 998 Vanguard. I need security at the stand immediately. I have a hostile passenger refusing to deplane. Naya watched him make the call. She didn't try to stop him. She simply unlocked her phone and dialed a number. "Who are you calling?" Silas demanded. "Your lawyer, save your money." Naya ignored him. She put the phone to her ear. "Hello. Yes, it's Nia. I'm at Teterboro, tail number 9998 VS. Yes, I have a situation. No, the pilot is refusing to fly. Reason: he says I don't fit the profile. Yes, he's calling security to have me dragged off. Okay, I'll wait." She hung up and sat back down. "Security is on the way," Silas said smugly. "I hope you enjoy the view from the back of a police cruiser." "We'll see," Nia said. She crossed her legs and opened a magazine. Minutes later, a Teterboro operations vehicle and a police cruiser pulled up to the jet. The stairs were lowered. 2 police officers and the Teterboro duty manager, a man named Frank, walked up the stairs. Silas met them at the door, chest puffed out. "Officer, thanks for coming," Silas said, shaking the cop's hand. "Passenger in 1A. Belligerent refused to identify properly potential fraud risk. I exercised my authority to deny carriage, and she refused to leave." The officer looked at Naya, who was still reading the magazine. "Ma'am, you need to come with us." Naya looked up. "I'm not going anywhere, officer. I have a contract for this flight." "Ma'am, the pilot is the final authority on the aircraft. If he wants you off, you get off. We can sort out the contract dispute on the ground. Please don't make us use force." Naya sighed. She looked at Frank, the duty manager. Frank looked uncomfortable. He knew Vanguard was a big client, but he also hated domestic disputes on the tarmac. "Frank, is it?" Naya asked. "Yes, ma'am," Frank said. "Frank, before these officers put their hands on me, I suggest you check the ownership registration of this aircraft. Not the operator Vanguard operates it. I mean, the owner." Silas rolled his eyes. "It's owned by a leasing shell company, like all of them. Stop wasting time." "Check it, Frank," Naya said softly. "Please." Frank hesitated. He pulled out his iPad. He logged into the FAA registry database. He typed in Mate VS. The color drained from Frank's face. He looked at the iPad. Then he looked at Nia. Then he looked back at the iPad. His hands started to shake. "Captain Gregson," Frank said, his voice trembling. "What?" Silas snapped. You might want to look at this." "I don't care who owns the damn plane," Silas yelled. "I work for Vanguard. Vanguard pays me. And I say she goes, Captain." Frank said louder this time, stepping between the police and Naya. "The aircraft is registered to Helix Medical Group. The LLC manager is listed as Nia Cross." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Silas froze. "What?" "She owns the plane," Frank whispered. "She doesn't just charter it. She bought it 2 days ago." Naya stood up again. She dropped the magazine on the floor. She wasn't the tired passenger anymore. She was the boss. "Actually, Frank," Nia said, her voice cutting through the air like a scalpel, "I didn't just buy the plane. Helix Medical acquired Vanguard Elite Aviation this morning at 9:00 a.m. London time. I'm not just the owner of the plane, Captain Gregson." She took a step toward the horrified pilot. "I'm the CEO of the company that signs your paycheck." The silence on the tarmac at Teterboro was broken only by the whip of the wind and the distant roar of a departing Gulf Stream. Inside the cabin of the Global 7500, the atmosphere was suffocating. Captain Silas Gregson stood frozen, his hand still hovering near his radio. His brain was misfiring, trying to process the information Frank had just delivered. She owns the plane. She owns the airline. It was impossible. In his worldview, established over 50 years of rigid social hierarchies, women like Nia Cross did not buy airlines. They worked for them, or they married the men who owned them. They didn't stand in hoodies and leggings and dissolve a man's career with a single sentence. That's a lie. Silas stammered, his face flushing a deep, mottled crimson. He turned on Frank, the duty manager. You're reading it wrong. It's a glitch in the registry, or it's a shell company with a similar name. Do you know how common the name Cross is? Frank shook his head slowly, stepping back. He wanted no part of the blast radius that was about to occur. It's not a glitch, Silas. The EIN matches. The acquisition press release is on the Bloomberg terminal right now. It just hit the wire. Helix Medical Group acquires Vanguard Elite Aviation for $450 million. Silas felt the blood drain from his legs. He looked back at Nia. She hadn't moved. She was watching him with a look of clinical detachment, like a surgeon observing a tumor that needed to be excised. Captain Gregson, Nia said, her voice eerily calm. I asked you to fly the plane. I gave you an opportunity to do your job. Instead, you chose to humiliate a passenger based on your own prejudice. You chose to delay a critical flight because you didn't like my shoes. I was following security protocol. Silas shouted, his voice cracking. He was desperate now, grasping at straws. I have a right to question suspicious passengers. You didn't identify yourself as the owner. That's entrapment. I identified myself as a passenger. Nia corrected him. That should have been enough. A passenger who paid. A passenger with valid ID. You didn't need to know I was the owner to treat me with basic human dignity. You needed to be a decent human being. You failed. Nia turned to the police officers, who were still standing on the stairs, looking unsure of what to do. Officers, Nia said, I would like this man removed from my aircraft immediately. He is trespassing. The senior officer nodded. The dynamic had shifted instantly. In the eyes of the law, Silas was no longer the authority figure. He was an ex-employee causing a disturbance. Come on, Captain, the officer said, reaching for Silas's arm. Let's go. Silas jerked his arm away. Don't touch me. I am the pilot in command. You can't just kick me off. Who is going to fly the plane, Dave? He spun around to point at his first officer, who was standing in the cockpit doorway. Dave isn't type-rated for command on this bird yet. He's just a warm body. You need me. Silas turned a smug grin back to Nia. See, you played your hand too early, Ms. CEO. You fired the only guy who can get this bird off the ground. You want to get to LA. You need me. So here is how this is going to work. I'm going to go back to the cockpit. We're going to forget this little power trip of yours, and when we land, we'll discuss my severance package. It was a bold, arrogant bluff. He thought he had the leverage of logistics. Nia didn't even blink. She looked past Silas to the cockpit. Dave. Dave Miller straightened up. He had been silent this whole time, watching his mentor implode. Dave was a good pilot, quiet, hard-working, and he had hated Silas's bullying for months. Yes, Miss Cross, Dave said. Are you current on the left seat? I just finished my check ride last week, ma'am, Dave said, his voice steady. I'm fully certified as captain on the Global 7500. Silas just didn't want to update the roster because he likes the seniority pay. Silas's jaw dropped. He whirled on Dave. You traitor! You told me you failed the sim. I lied, Silas, Dave said, stepping out of the cockpit, his face hard. Because I knew if I passed you'd make my life miserable until you retired. I'm rated. I can fly this plane. Naya nodded. Dave, you are now the acting captain of this flight. Do we have a relief pilot available at Teterboro to sit right seat? Yes, ma'am, Dave said. Jennifer is in the crew lounge on standby. She can be here in 5 minutes. Call her, Nia said. She looked back at Silas. The smugness was gone. He looked small. He looked old. You're fired, Mr. Gregson, Nia said. Not just from this flight, from Vanguard. And I will personally ensure that the FAA receives a full report on your conduct today. Now get off my plane before I have you arrested for endangering a flight crew. You can't do this, Silas screamed as the officers grabbed him firmly this time. I have 30 years. I know people. I'll sue you. I'll sue this whole damn airline. Get him out of here, Nia said, turning her back on him. As the officers dragged Silas down the stairs, kicking and shouting obscenities that echoed across the wet tarmac, Nia didn't watch. She sat back down in seat 1A. Her hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from rage. She took a deep breath. Andrew, she called out. Andrew appeared instantly, looking terrified that she might be next. I'm sorry you had to see that, Andrew, Nia said softly. Are you okay to fly? Yes, ma'am. Andrew breathed. Thank you. He's been difficult for a long time. He won't bother you again, Nia said. Now please get Jennifer on board. We need to leave. We've lost 40 minutes, and I don't have 40 minutes to spare. 10 minutes later, Jennifer, the relief pilot, sprinted up the stairs, breathless but professional. The door was sealed. The engines whined to life, a high-pitched scream that sounded like music to Nia's ears. As the jet taxied to the runway, Nia reclined her seat, but she didn't sleep. She pulled a thick file from her backpack, the same backpack Silas had sneered at. It wasn't full of clothes. It was full of medical imaging, high-resolution MRIs, CT scans, and 3D printed models of a human brain stem. This was the twist that Silas had been too blinded by prejudice to see. This wasn't a business trip. It wasn't a vacation. Nia Cross wasn't just a CEO. She was Dr. Nia Cross, the lead pediatric neurosurgeon at the Helix Institute in Los Angeles. And waiting for her at UCLA Medical Center was a 7-year-old boy named Toby. Toby had a cavernous malformation in his brain stem that had ruptured 3 hours ago. It was a ticking time bomb. Most surgeons wouldn't touch it. It was too deep, too dangerous. Nia was the only one who had successfully performed the procedure using a specific, minimally invasive technique she had invented. She had been in Tokyo negotiating the purchase of Vanguard, specifically to secure a fleet of medical transport jets for cases exactly like this. But when the call came about, Toby she had dropped everything to fly back. The golden hour, the critical window for survival, was closing. Captain Miller, Nia spoke into the cabin intercom phone. What's our ETA? We're pushing it, Ms. Cross. Dave's voice came over the speaker, sounding tense. Because of the delay at the gate, we missed our slot in the jet stream. We're fighting a headwind now. I'm looking at 5 hours and 30 minutes. That puts us landing at 4:45 p.m. Pacific. Nia looked at her watch. The surgery was scheduled for 5:00 p.m. That gave her 15 minutes to get from LAX to UCLA. It was impossible in Los Angeles traffic. Even with a police escort, it would take 20. We need to go faster, Dave, Nia said. I'm already redlining it, ma'am, burning fuel like crazy. If I push any harder, we dip into reserves. Do it, Nia said. I'll authorize the maintenance checks later. Just get me there. For the next 5 hours, the cabin was silent. Naya studied the scans. She visualized the surgery. She practiced the movements of her hands in the air. She tried to ignore the gnawing anger at Silas Gregson. His ego had cost them 40 minutes. If Toby died because she was late. Naya closed her eyes. Focus. In the cockpit, Dave and Jennifer were working in perfect sync, battling turbulence over the Rockies. They knew who was in the back. They knew the stakes. Dave had flown medical missions before, but never with the surgeon on board. "Center, this is Med-Evac Global 998. Dave radioed, changing their call sign to reflect the medical urgency. "Requesting direct routing to LAX priority handling. We have a time-critical surgeon on board." "Global 998 Center. Unable direct due to military airspace active over Nevada." The controller replied. "Center, Global 998. Lives are at risk." "We need that airspace," Dave argued. There was a pause. "Stand by, Global 998. Naya listened to the comms from her seat. She gripped the armrest. "Global 998 cleared through the MOA at flight level 450. Direct LAX. Good luck." "Thank you, Center," Dave said. He pushed the throttles forward. They touched down at LAX at 4:35 p.m. Dave slammed the brakes, utilizing the full length of the runway to stop quickly near the private hangar. Before the engines had even spooled down, the stairs were lowering. A helicopter, Naya's private transport, was already spinning its rotors on the tarmac 50 yards away. Naya grabbed her backpack. She looked at Andrew. "Great service, Andrew. Tell Dave he's officially the chief pilot for the fleet, starting tomorrow." Naya ran down the stairs, her sneakers hitting the pavement hard. She sprinted toward the helicopter, her hair whipping in the rotor wash. She jumped in, and the chopper lifted off, banking hard toward Westwood. She made it to the scrub room at 4:58 p.m. As she washed her hands, staring at her reflection in the steel mirror, she saw the exhaustion in her eyes. But she also saw the fire. She was here. She had made it. Despite the rain. Despite the exhaustion. Despite Captain Silas Gregson. The operating theater at UCLA Medical Center was a sanctuary of cold, sterile silence, broken only by the rhythmic beep, beep, beep of the cardiac monitor and the hiss of the ventilator. Dr. Naya Cross stood over the operating table. Her eyes pressed against the rubber eyepieces of a $200,000 Zeiss surgical microscope. The world outside didn't exist. The rain at Teterboro, the yelling pilot, the acquisition of a multi-million-dollar airline, none of it mattered. The only thing in the universe was the millimeter of space between a microscopic retractor and the basilar artery of a 7-year-old boy named Toby. "Suction," Nia whispered. Her voice was muffled by her mask, but her team heard her. They always did. "Suctioning," the assisting resident replied. Naya's hands were steady, rock steady, but her mind was racing. The delay at Teterboro had cost them 45 minutes. In the world of a ruptured cavernoma, 45 minutes was an eternity. The pressure inside Toby's cranium had increased during that lost time. The tissue was swollen, angry, and reactive. If we had been here 30 minutes ago, Nia thought fighting the urge to curse Silas Gregson aloud, this vessel wouldn't be this fragile. "BP is spiking," the anesthesiologist warned softly. 150/90. Intracranial pressure is rising. "I see it," Naya said, her voice betraying no fear. "He's reacting to the clip placement. I need absolute stillness. No one breathe." She guided the micro-instrument deeper. This was the moment. The golden hour was technically over. They were now in overtime, fighting against the body's own inflammatory response. She had to place a titanium clip on a vessel thinner than a strand of hair, deep within the brain stem, the control center for breathing and heartbeat. One slip, one tremor, and Toby wouldn't wake up. Or worse, he would wake up locked in, aware, but unable to move anything but his eyes. Naya visualized the anatomy. She channeled the rage she had felt on the tarmac, the indignation of being treated like a criminal in her own jet, and transmuted it into pure, laser-focused focus. You don't get to win, Silas, she thought as she aligned the clip. You don't get to kill this boy. Deploying, Naya said. Click. The tiny titanium jaw snapped shut. The room held its breath. They watched the monitor. The bleeding stopped. The pressure wave on the screen leveled out. Bleeding controlled. The resident exhaled, sounding like he might faint. ICP is normalizing. Naya pulled back from the microscope. She slowly lowered her hands. Her shoulders, which had been locked in tension for 4 hours, finally slumped. Close him up, Naya said, stepping back from the table. Good work, everyone. We got him. She stripped off her gloves and walked to the scrub sink. As she washed the betadine from her arms, she looked at the clock on the wall. 9:15 p.m. They had made it, but only just. 3,000 miles away in a holding cell at the Port Authority police station in New Jersey, time was moving much slower for Silas Gregson. He sat on a metal bench bolted to the floor, staring at the graffiti scratched into the cinderblock wall. He had been processed fingerprinted and had his mugshot taken. The humiliation was burning in his gut like acid. But mostly Silas was angry. He was rewriting the narrative in his head, refining the story he would tell. She was insubordinate, he told himself. She refused to identify herself properly. I was following post-9/11 security protocols. The police overreacted. The company will back me. They have to. I'm a senior captain with a pristine record. He was convinced that once he got to a phone, he could fix this. He would call Bob, the chief pilot. He would call his union rep. They would issue a statement about unruly passengers and security risks. By tomorrow morning, this Naya Cross woman would be the one apologizing to him. The heavy steel door clanked open. A desk sergeant walked in holding a plastic bag containing Silas's personal effects. Bail is posted, the sergeant grunted. Your wife called. She put it on the credit card. She sounded thrilled. Silas ignored the sarcasm. He snatched the bag. About time. I want to file a formal complaint against the arresting officers for excessive force. Yeah, take it up with the judge at your arraignment next week, the sergeant said, turning his back. You're free to go. Silas walked out into the lobby. He grabbed his phone from the plastic bag. It had been turned off for 6 hours. He powered it on his thumb, hovering over the keypad, ready to dial the union hotline. The phone buzzed. Then it buzzed again. Then it began to vibrate continuously, a long, unbroken spasm of notifications that nearly shook the device out of his hand. Ping, 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 ping. Silas frowned. He looked at the screen. 452 missed calls. 1. 200 plus new text messages. 8,500 plus Twitter mentions. 320 emails. His blood ran cold. He opened his text messages. The top one was from his 20-year-old daughter, Chloe. Dad. OMG. Please tell me this isn't real. It's everywhere. Why did you say that to her? Silas's hands started to shake. He opened the Twitter app. He didn't even have to search for it. It was the #1 trending topic in the United States, trending above the NFL playoffs and the president's speech. Hashtag the racist pilot. Vanguard. Karen Mashat Nyacross. He clicked the first hashtag. The video auto-played. It was Andrew's footage. The angle was from the galley looking slightly up at him. The audio was crystal clear. "Listen to me, little girl," the Silas on the screen sneered. The malice in his voice was undeniable. "I don't know who you think you are. I don't fly untrustworthy passengers. You don't fit the profile." Then the camera panned to Nia. She looked regal, calm, almost bored. And then came the kill shot. The moment Frank, the operations manager, read the iPad. "The aircraft is registered to Helix Medical Group. She owns the plane." Silas watched his own face on the screen as he realized the truth. He looked small. He looked pathetic. He looked like a bully whose lunch money had just been stolen. He scrolled down to the comments. It was a digital firing squad. Fly High 22. "I'm a commercial pilot. This guy is a disgrace to the uniform. Fit the profile is code for I'm a racist dinosaur. Strip his wings." At Tech Boss. "Imagine trying to kick your own boss off the plane because she's wearing a hoodie. The audacity is actually impressive." At Legal Eagle. "I hope he likes courtrooms. That's defamation, breach of contract, and discrimination wrapped in a nice 4K video." Silas felt bile rise in his throat. He dialed Bob, the chief pilot, at Vanguard. He needed an ally. He needed someone to tell him it was going to be okay. The phone rang once. "Gregson." Bob's voice answered. It wasn't friendly. It was the voice of a man who was cutting away dead weight. "Bob." "Thank God," Silas stammered, walking out into the rain of the police station parking lot. "Listen, that video, it's out of context. She baited me. You have to put out a statement supporting the crew's discretion regarding safety." "There is no statement, Silas," Bob said coldly, "unless you count the termination letter I just emailed to you." "Termination?" Silas screamed. "You can't terminate me without a hearing. The union won't allow it." "The union just watched the video, Silas. They aren't touching this. You violated the morality clause in your contract, the code of conduct, and about 4 different FAA regulations regarding crew resource management. I have 30 years of service." "You had 30 years, Bob corrected. "Now you have a lawsuit. Helix Medical's legal team just served the office. They aren't just suing the company, Silas. They are naming you personally in a civil suit for intentional infliction of emotional distress and tortious interference with a medical emergency." "Medical emergency?" Silas froze. "What are you talking about? Didn't you know?" Bob's voice dropped, dripping with disgust. She wasn't flying to LA for a vacation. She was flying to perform emergency brain surgery on a 7-year-old kid. "The delay you caused, it almost killed the patient. The press knows about it. CNN is running the doctor versus bigot segment in 10 minutes. The phone slipped from Silas's ear. He didn't hear Bob hang up. All he could hear was the rushing of his own blood in his ears. A child. He had delayed a brain surgeon on her way to a dying child because he didn't like her sneakers. He slumped against the brick wall of the police station, the rain soaking through his uniform jacket. The uniform that was now just a costume. He tried to open his Uber app to get a ride home, desperate to hide from the public eye. "Account suspended. Your account has been flagged for violation of community standards, pending an investigation into discriminatory conduct." He tried Lyft. Suspended. He tried to log into his bank app to transfer funds. Account frozen pending litigation. He was stranded. Silas Gregson, the man who had commanded $60 million jets, the man who had looked down on the world from 40,000 feet, was now standing in a puddle in New Jersey with no ride, no money, no job, and the entire world hating him. He looked up at the sky. Somewhere up there, a plane was flying. But he knew with a terrifying certainty that he would never sit in a cockpit again. The hard karma Naya had warned him about hadn't just hit back. It had crushed him. He pulled his collar up against the wind and started walking toward the bus stop. It was going to be a long, wet walk. 6 months had passed since the rain-soaked confrontation on the Teterboro tarmac. In the world of high-stakes aviation, 6 months is usually enough time for a scandal to be buried, for names to be forgotten, and for the status quo to return. But the Teterboro incident had not faded. It had become a parable. The view from the top, the main hangar of Helix Medical Aviation in Los Angeles, had been transformed. The smell of jet fuel and grease was gone, replaced by the scent of fresh orchids and expensive catering. The space was bathed in soft blue light, the company's new signature color. A string quartet played softly near the nose gear of the flagship aircraft, the very Bombardier Global 7500 that had been the stage for the drama. Dr. Nia Cross stood on a raised platform overlooking the crowd of 300 people. She wore a midnight blue evening gown that commanded as much respect as her surgical scrubs. In her hand, she held a glass of sparkling water, but her eyes weren't on the investors or the press. They were fixed on a small boy running near the buffet table. Toby, now 7.5, was laughing as he chased a balloon. He moved with a slight, almost imperceptible limp, the only lingering ghost of the massive brainstem hemorrhage that had nearly killed him. "He looks good, doesn't he?" Naya turned to see Dave Miller standing beside her. The former first officer looked different. The uncertainty that had once clouded his eyes was gone, replaced by the calm, steel-spined confidence of a director of flight operations. His uniform was impeccable, the 4 gold stripes on his shoulder boards gleaming under the hangar lights. "He looks like a miracle, Dave," Nia replied softly. "And he's walking because you pushed those throttles past the red line." Dave shook his head modestly. "I just flew the plane, Nia. You did the rest." "But I did the math the other day, with the headwinds we had over the Rockies. If we had left Teterboro 20 minutes later, just 20 minutes, the hypoxic damage would have been irreversible. Toby might be alive, but he wouldn't be running." The weight of that statement hung between them. 20 minutes. That was less time than Silas Gregson had spent arguing about Nia's hoodie. The margin between a child running and a child in a wheelchair had been the size of one man's ego. "Speaking of the past," Dave said, his voice dropping lower, "Andrew is back from her training rotation in Chicago. She's over by the bar. You might want to ask her about her trip." Nia frowned slightly. "Is everything okay?" "Oh, everything is fine." Dave said, a strange, grim expression crossing his face. "But she saw something, or rather, someone. I think you should hear it. The view from the bottom, 2,000 miles away, the wind at Chicago O'Hare International Airport, didn't just blow. It cut. It was a wet, freezing gale that turned the slush on the roadways into grey concrete." Silas Gregson sat behind the wheel of the Easy Park and Fly shuttle bus, shivering. The vehicle was a rattling rust bucket Ford E450 that smelled of stale cigarette smoke and damp wool. The heater had been broken for a week, and his manager, a 24-year-old kid named Kyle, who delighted in bossing Silas around, had laughed when Silas asked for it to be fixed. "Put on a sweater, Gregson. Budget cuts." Silas stared out the cracked windshield, watching the endless stream of luxury cars dropping passengers off at the terminal. He rubbed his hands together to keep the circulation going. His knuckles were swollen. His back ached constantly. He looked at the dashboard. Next to a half-eaten sandwich was a crumpled letter from his lawyer. It was the final decree of his divorce. His wife Martha hadn't just left him. She had eviscerated him in court. She testified that living with him after his public disgrace had become unbearable, citing his explosive temper and refusal to accept reality. She got the house. She got the retirement fund, what was left of it after the Helix lawsuit. Silas was living in a studio apartment above a laundromat in a neighborhood he used to make fun of. "Hey, driver. You asleep?" A sharp rap on the glass startled him. Silas jerked his head up. A businessman was standing in the slush, looking annoyed. "Open the door, I'm freezing out here," the man yelled. Silas scrambled to hit the lever. The hydraulic door hissed open with a groan. "Sorry, sir." Silas mumbled the words, tasting like ash in his mouth. "I didn't see you." "Yeah, well, wake up. I have a flight to London in 2 hours." Silas stood up to help with the luggage. It was part of the job requirement. If he didn't load bags, he didn't get a tips. And if he didn't get tips, he didn't eat dinner. He hauled the heavy Samsonite suitcases into the rack, his breath pluming in the cold air. The businessman didn't say thank you. He just climbed on board and buried his face in his phone. Silas sat back down, gripping the worn steering wheel. He caught a glimpse of himself in the rearview mirror. The man looking back was a stranger. His silver hair, once gelled and precise, was thinning and unkempt. His face was gaunt, the lines around his mouth etched deep with bitterness. He wasn't Captain Gregson anymore. He was just driver. The encounter. The radio crackled. "Unit 4, swing by Terminal 3 international arrivals. We got a crew pickup requested for the layover hotel." "Copy," Silas muttered. He hated crew pickups. Seeing the pilots and flight attendants in their crisp uniforms laughing, dragging their roller bags, it was a torture he couldn't escape. It was a reminder of the kingdom he had been exiled from. He pulled the bus up to the curb at Terminal 3. The hydraulic brakes squealed loudly, drawing a few looks of disgust from the people on the sidewalk. A group of 3 people was waiting. They were dressed in immaculate navy blue uniforms. The coats were tailored, the gold buttons shining. Silas froze. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He knew those uniforms. He knew the logo embroidered on the lapels. The double helix DNA strand woven into wings. Helix Medical Aviation. It was his old crew, or rather the crew that had replaced him. Standing there shivering slightly in the Chicago wind was Andrew. She looked older, more authoritative, wearing the pin of a lead cabin attendant. Next to her were 2 younger pilots. He didn't recognize the new generation. Silas wanted to sink into the floorboards. He wanted to jam the bus into gear and speed away. But he couldn't. Kyle would fire him, and he needed this $14 an hour job. He pulled his cap down low, praying they wouldn't recognize him. He hit the door lever. Andrew stepped up first. She was laughing at something the co-pilot said, but her laughter died instantly when she looked at the driver. The silence that filled the bus was louder than the roaring jets overhead. Silas couldn't meet her eyes. He stared at his hands, which were gripping the wheel so hard his knuckles were white. He saw Andrew's gaze travel over him, taking in the cheap, ill-fitting polyester jacket of the parking company, the fingerless gloves, the tired slump of his shoulders. "Welcome aboard," Silas croaked, his voice unrecognizable even to himself. Andrew didn't move for a long second. The young pilot behind her nudged her. "Andrew, you okay?" Andrew blinked. She looked at Silas, not with the fear she used to have, and not even with anger. She looked at him with something far worse. Pity. "I'm fine," Andrew said quietly. She stepped onto the bus. She didn't say his name. She didn't make a scene. She simply swiped her crew pass on the reader and moved to the back of the bus. But as the young co-pilot stepped up, he looked at Silas with a cheerful grin. "Rough night out there, huh, buddy? Here, let me help you with those bags." "No," Silas snapped too quickly. I got it. It's my job." He had to stand up. He had to walk past Andrew. He had to go outside into the slush and lift the bags of the people who were living his life. He grabbed the handle of the captain's bag. It was a Vanguard legacy bag, leather-worn in all the right places. It smelled of the cockpit, that mix of coffee ozone and conditioned air. A tear leaked out of Silas's eye, hot and humiliating, mixing with the freezing rain on his cheek. He heaved the bag into the rack, his back screaming in protest. When he got back in the driver's seat, he didn't look in the mirror. He drove in silence. When they reached the hotel, the crew got off. The young pilot dropped a $5 bill into Silas's tip jar. "Stay warm, man," the pilot said. Andrew was the last to leave. She paused at the door. She looked at the back of Silas's head. "Drive safe, Silas," she whispered. The doors hissed shut. The final descent, back in Los Angeles on the balcony, Naya listened to Andrew's story. Andrew had called from the hotel room, her voice trembling. Naya looked out at the LA night sky. The story didn't make her feel triumphant. It didn't make her smile. It just confirmed what she had always known. "The universe has a way of balancing the books, doesn't it?" Dave asked, standing beside her. "It does," Nia said. "He spent his whole life thinking he was above people. Now he spends his days looking up at them." She turned back to the party, to Toby, to the future. "Come on, Dave," Nia said, turning her back on the dark horizon. "We have a flight to plan for tomorrow. There's a girl in Seattle who needs a heart transplant, and I don't want to be late." Seen the parking lot. Back in Chicago. The bus was empty. Silas sat alone in the dark corner of the parking lot, the engine idling roughly. Through the windshield, he watched a plane take off. It was a Global 7500 banking sharply, its afterburners glowing like twin stars against the black clouds. It climbed higher and higher, punching through the storm, soaring above the turbulence, above the pettiness, above the slush. Silas watched it until it disappeared. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the $5 bill the young pilot had given him. A tip. Charity. He crumpled it in his fist and rested his forehead against the steering wheel. The silence of the bus was suffocating. He was finally the captain of his own vessel, but he was going nowhere. The radio crackled. "Unit 4. Where are you? We got a drunk guy at Terminal 1. Pick him up." Silas wiped his face with his rough wool sleeve. He put the bus in gear. "Copy," he whispered. "Unit 4 is on the way." And that is how one moment of arrogance grounded a high-flying career forever. Captain Silas Gregson thought his uniform gave him the right to judge, but he forgot the golden rule of life: you never know who you're talking to. He saw a hoodie and saw a threat. He should have seen the brilliance that was about to sign his paycheck. This story isn't just about a plane ride. It's a reminder that true power doesn't scream or bully, it acts. Nia Cross didn't need to yell to prove her worth. She just needed to be herself. Silas learned the hard way that when you look down on people, you eventually trip and fall. What would you have done if you were in Nia's shoes? Would you have fired him or given him a second chance? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and justice, please smash that like button. Share this with a friend who needs a reality check, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching.